welcome. Sunday morning. Today, something a little bit different. In keeping with Carey really wanting to build a kind of a very large sacred site here. We are here on Friday walking the land looking for little hotspots of energy and trying to give them an idea of where to set things up, because there's little vortices that pop out of the ground all around the planet, especially here because you've got an aquifer and you've got water that runs under limestone. You get a natural vortex of water coming up and it pops up in little pockets, and sometimes you see it where the vegetation is a little bit different. So we're walking around and giving us an idea of where to put this massive replica of Stonehenge, and I mean, he's serious. We're talking 30-foot rocks. He's going to do it properly. So I thought it was kind of appropriate that I'll talk about this because it's really the mechanics behind sacred space and how to essentially, what makes these things tick. Because the thing about sacred space and temples in general around the world is that these are the places that mark the veil where they mark the places where the veil between worlds is very, very thin. They're the thin places, as they call them. There's something about the laws of physics as we understand them. Bless you. Where actually, I don't know people why still say that. It's an old plague thing. It's true in England. If someone sneezes, it's like, well, bless you, because you're about to die of plague. But we still do it today. It's funny, isn't it? It's a reflex. Anyway, these are the places where things are very thin, where the laws of physics as we know them behave a little bit differently. And I was astonished to find that in 2008, NASA actually came into the picture and began to describe exactly what we've been talking about for years. And they said that with our newfangled, is it working? Yeah. With our newfangled equipment that we have flying around the Earth, we've discovered that there's an interaction taking place above the Earth's atmosphere, where the Earth's magnetic field suddenly starts to interact with the sun and the solar wind. And they said that there are these magnetic portals, and I quote, magnetic portals that open every dozens of times each day, and they're sending information from the Earth all the way up to the atmosphere, and it goes straight to the sun, like communication packets, and from the sun somewhere else in the universe. And I thought, wow, finally, because they're describing this in the very same way that people used to do in the old days, about these magnetic tubes that basically revolve out of the Earth, and then they go and take your consciousness somewhere else. And these things actually extend to the surface. These packets of energy extend to the surface. If you have your mind's eye or your inner vision very open, this is what a normal landscape would look like to you, because not only do you see the trees and the rivers and the birds and the fish, you'll also see these telluric currents, not ley lines. Those things are very different. You see these telluric currents flowing like ribbons through the field, and you see these eddies of energy popping up all over the place, and it can be very, very distracting as well. So it just takes a bit of sensitivity. Anybody could do this. Someone was telling me about 30 years ago when I was starting off on my journey, oh yeah, you don't need dowsing rods or pendulums and all of that stuff. That's just to give you confidence. After a while, you can see the energy, where it's flowing, the current, the direction of movement. I thought, these people are smoking something really good. And now I can just sit here and go, oh, there goes one over there. And it's a masculine line, and it meets with that thing there. It's like you're in two worlds, and anybody can do this. All you have to do is be on the landscape, become much more open, and attune yourself and your electromagnetic grid to the landscape, and suddenly it interacts with you. So where these forces from above and below interact, the energy of the land becomes very much amplified. There's a certain sort of power to it. We have a technical term for it. We call it the tingly-wingly. So when you're walking along the land, you're going, I'm getting the tingly-wingly. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling that too. That's when you realize that your body's electrical systems are beginning to get charged up, and you're connected with something much greater than yourself. But the funny thing is, it wasn't just NASA and us sort of latter-day dowsers that were doing this. All of this was known in ancient India, because if you're familiar with the Vedas, I'm not talking about Darth Vader and his family, I'm talking about the books, the Vedas of the Tamil culture. They actually have exactly the same phrase that NASA uses in their press release, just written with different words. And this is what they said. There are serpents that move along the earth, which are mirrored in the sky, which are the arrows of sorcerers. All you have to do to understand what they're saying is the metaphor that they used back in the day. Anytime they use the word serpent, it refers to the electromagnetic currents that flow like serpents through the land, like ribbons. A sorcerer is someone who works with source energy. That's where the word comes from. You work with source energy, you are a sorcerer, you are a seeker of the source. And the arrow is how the energy is guided from A to B using the power of your intention. So your intention is the most important thing on the planet. Guided intention, you can send a packet of information from here to there in a fraction of a second. And if you don't believe me, sit down with a cup of tea outside or a cup of coffee and think very fondly of someone you haven't heard from a long time, and your phone will ring in 4 minutes. That's how it works, because that packet goes straight to that person, and they'll go, oh, I haven't called Freddy in a while. Hi, how you doing? I was just thinking about you, and I goes, yeah. I said, you did it again, didn't you? Yeah. That's why my phone bill is only $20 a month, bastard. And that's how it works. And the Vedas go on to talk about how this stuff is really, really ancient, the sourcing and moving of energy. It kind of was written up in 9,600 BC, and that book was copied from 4 early academies, which together ranged for 2,600 years each before they all were taken out by increasing ocean levels. So by the time you get to about 16,000 BC, the land of southern India and Sri Lanka, it used to extend all the way to the Maldives 16,000 years ago. This is where this stuff comes from. It keeps getting regurgitated again and again and again. If you go down the road, technically speaking, because everything in America is a 5-hour drive is just down the road. In England, down the road is 5 minutes. 5-hour drive is, I'll stay at a hotel here and a hotel there. Take 3 days to get there. Down the road, Native Americans, they work with this energy, still today, in the kivas. This is a bandolier. Anybody familiar with bandolier? Yeah. You take the big ladder up. It's a wonderful place. And you think, who the hell... What were they smoking when you had this beautiful river valley with a beautiful shade? You could put a nice kiva down here. No, you got these series of ladders that go up this vertical cliff face about 100 feet up, and there's a natural cave, and this is where you find the kiva. And you think, why not make it difficult for yourself? And the point is that the reason why they chose this particular very difficult, hard-to-access place is because there are 2 intersecting female telluric currents that happen to actually meet where the kiva happens to be. And it's actually marked by 2 alcoves on either side of the kiva. So if you go down into through the top, go inside, look at the alcoves, and they're very strangely positioned. And if you don't believe it, you get your dowsing rods out and you go, wait a minute, there's 2 currents coming in here, and they intersect right in the center. So that's what they were looking for. They're using that energy in order to assist their vision quest, because you're literally putting your body, your electromagnetic body, in an energized electromagnetic environment, and it's creating a third option, which is it's expanding you. It's creating this bigger connection between you and the invisible universe. And where the currents actually converge, they rotate like a spiral, like a big tube. And the native people call it a sipapu reed. It's the reed of heaven. And most people go to the kivas and they look at the big fire pit and they think about a barbecue or something. Look at the little dot a little further away. Okay, everybody misses that dot. That's where the reed of heaven happens to circulate within the actual kiva like a spiral, and it goes through the kiva all the way up to the atmosphere. It's pretty cool, but everybody misses it. And if you had a visiting Japanese person coming into the kiva and you explain this, they'll go, oh, that's plagiarism. We've got that as well in Japan in our temples, and we call it the reed of the sky. And it helps us link the temple with the realm of the gods, or on a sacred mountain. If there's a special cave above all other caves, there's a certain reed in there that helps you like a thread to connect to the world of the gods. And then the Persians will show up in Japan and they'll say, that's plagiarism because we've got that story too. So everybody's ripping each other off. The Persians have these ritual caves on sacred mountains, and they say that they are connected by a golden reed. Yeah, there's a cave there, normal cave, that's a normal cave, but that one, that's special. There's something happening in there where the tingly-winglies are operating, where you connect with something much greater than yourself. So essentially, when you have this meeting of energy, the sacred site becomes a mediating place between two different worlds. It's the junction between two different levels of reality, and that's why it's sacred, because these become tools for enlightenment and for vision quests and for receiving information that you can share with yourself or the tribe to help you survive, essentially. For example, many of the stories in the last 4,000 years and climate change today is one of a series of climate changes that have been going on forever, by the way. It's nothing new. And they were saying that when climate changes, the shaman used to go to these special places and they would communicate with the world of the gods. They would bring information and they would go to the tribe and they would say, we need to move further south this year because the snow is going to be heavier by August instead of November, and we've got to camp here, and then we've got to move here because there'll be flooding here. And they'd be absolutely right, because you're literally tapping into a natural reference library. And the management knows better than you do because they're much more connected. So if you don't know what you're doing, ask the management. They'll tell you, you tell the tribe, and you keep surviving from age to age. Now, having said all this, before we built temples, sacred space was just the landscape. There was nothing going on except energy, the land, and you. And there was a time, a long time ago, when we sensed the landscape. We didn't need to be told where stuff was. You can just walk along the landscape and you stop and you go, oh, this is nice. I'm going to sit here and connect with the fairies. And there's a wonderful story about how people figured out that there are certain parts of the earth actually are very special. And it comes from the Hopi, of course. They have a creation myth. And it's very interesting. They said that in the beginning, the Creator creates the first human. And it sends him down to the South Pole with a drum. Of course. Honey, I'm just going to the South Pole. What do you take with you? I'm taking a drum. You know, very practical thing to take to the South Pole. And the story goes that the man goes, or the woman goes to the South Pole with a drum and hears the heartbeat of the Earth Mother beating. And when he hears the heartbeat, he starts banging the drum. And there's a sympathetic resonance between the heartbeat and the Earth Mother. And when there's a sympathetic resonance between the two beats, the Earth begins to send all of these strings of energy to the surface, and the land becomes abundant with life force. But, they said, there are some places where the energy coalesced in greater spots than all the others, and those were called the spots of the fawn. Very romantic. And those are the power places, the places where the energy was much more concentrated, where you can sense a deeper connection with the spirit of the land and beyond as well. So in Australia, they have exactly the same concept of the land. And here you got a real issue because you got 3/4 of Australia is desert. It's featureless. You will die unless you know what the hell you're doing. And I have to admire them, the Aboriginal people, because they know so much stuff. They got stories going back 2 million years, events that happened in 2 million years, and they can be validated, especially falling meteorites. There was a recent study by a group of geologists from Adelaide University, which they were reading the story that this particular valley in the middle of the outback, they're saying it was caused by a crashing earth shaker, their name for a comet. But that must have been over 1 million years ago. So they went there, they did LiDAR, they found the meteorite, and the strata was about 1 million years old. And they told the Aboriginal people, so he's telling me that you were here to witness it and you actually remember this? Said, yeah, and we got older stories than that. I mean, they have such a dry sense of humor, these people. It's unbelievable. But in order to survive, the Aboriginal people have to sense the landscape. And what they do is they tune in to this featureless desert and they find a thing called a jalkidi, which it means the footprints of the ancestors. And they behave like these magnetic strips of tape that, you know, flow invisibly along the land, but they can hear them and they can see them. So you're walking along the desert to get from A to B, and you know it's 60 miles, and you know if you mess up, you die. You're going to be fodder for snakes and all other kinds of wild creatures. But they suddenly turn on a dime because they can hear the imprint of the story on this magnetic strip of tape laid there by the people that walked it before. So they know where they're going. And they'll just turn right, and they'll continue following the trail for about 60 miles, and they end up exactly where they need to be. That's genius. So someone actually in the academic world decided to find out if this was true, or they were just making this up. Well, it turns out when the Jalkiri were used to find sacred sites, the margin of error was less than 3%. But when you use the Jalkiri to go to non-spiritual places, the margin of error was over 67%, sure death. So it's always connecting the sacred sites to each other. There's an element of energy connecting all the sacred sites together, even invisibly. So it's a bit like accessing modern-day cloud computing. The information is available on demand. You just have to listen, tap into it, and receive images, visions, and then follow and trust the process, and it will never let you down. And that's the thing. The trust is very, very important. Now, you're probably familiar with petroglyphs. The petroglyphs are an amazing thing, and I'm talking about the ones which feature animals and hunting scenes. We know what those mean. The hard part is when you get these abstract shapes, because unfortunately we killed all the people moving from Europe who knew what they meant. So nowadays you've got to really hang out, make friends with the wisdom keepers, the surviving wisdom keepers, to find out what do the symbols mean. And if you befriend them and you show that you are honest about this, they will respond in kind. And one of the best stories that I heard, and I think it was from the Zuni, they said the thing about these petroglyphs, where they appear like big pieces of newspaper on a rock, they are essentially a description of your interaction with the sacred space and what you see and experience in the other world. And when you come back, in order to tell the tale, you describe the story in these geometric shapes. The trouble is, for people like us, with our background, we don't know what they mean, but the alphabet is known to the local tribes. So if you see these shapes, you know exactly what the information was they received, and you know how to interpret them. So essentially, they're shorthand accounts of your astral journeying. The thing is, what was learned during their out-of-body experience was a kind of cosmic truth or a revelation or even the mechanics of nature. And again, it helped them survive from age to age to age. So it's what we call the mysteries teachings, or the universal wisdom, or the astral reference library. Whatever word you want to call it, you're accessing an encyclopedia of information which serves you again and again and again. But it turns out that locations of these big concentrations of petroglyphs are not random at all. They mark the boundary between two different types of geology. And what's important about this is that when you get two different geologies rubbing against each other, you create what a geologist called a conductivity discontinuity. And I bet you won't remember that phrase very long. But thank God we have people like the Sioux, because they said, oh, we've got an easier word to describe that. We call it scan. Great, I can remember that. It's much easier than recalling a conductivity discontinuity. And so you ask the Sioux, and they'll say, yeah, basically this is energy where the petroglyphs are. There's a rubbing together of minerals. And when it concentrates at power places, it influences your state of consciousness. It elevates your personal power in the form of personal attunement. So in essence, the energy is raising your resonance to match the resonance of the site. And when there's a connection between the two, it's like your fingers are stuck in an electrical socket and you go, bingo, you're connected to the outer universe and you're away with the fairies. And these are their words, not mine. And they kept emphasizing as well that the more contact you have with multiple power places, you start building up this numinous resonance inside your body, which is how you start expanding that God-given ability to sense the world around you. Because we've spent so much of our lives in here, in the left brain, trying to intellectualize our way out of all problems. That gets you only so far. Your intuition is much, much greater, and it leads you to places which this part of the brain cannot take you. And that's why they used to do it. And this is why some places were deemed more sacred than the others, like sacred mountains. Why aren't all mountains sacred? Well, because some mountains just happen to be exactly where you need them to be, with the right kind of energy concentration, which allows for that skip between this world and the next. And if you go to the Four Corners, and I hope you do, because Sebitai, or if you want to call it in the local vernacular, shiprock. I prefer Sebitai because it's the angel with the wings, much more romantic. It actually occupies a geomagnetic hotspot, and it's not far from the reservation at Shiprock. And I've seen grown A-type men cry at the base of this, the throat of this eroded volcano. Yeah, I was one of them. Because it's raw power. It doesn't have to show off. It doesn't have to electrocute you. You sit at the base, because you can't climb it. It's very dangerous to climb it, and it's sacred. You shouldn't climb it anyway. You stand at the base, and you feel this raw power, and you sit there, and you are humbled. And believe me, if you've not been there, go. Especially at the quiet times of the year. Usually there's nobody there, and it's not easy to find the trails when you get there. So look on Google Earth, make some notes, and then follow the dike. Keep the dike on your left when you cross the road. There's a hole in the fence. Keep the dike on your left, and you'll get there. Otherwise, if you follow the wrong trail, you're in the middle of nowhere. They'll never find your body. But don't let that, dismay you. Just keep your wits about you. I remember being there for the first time, and I've always wanted to go there, even when I was in England. First time I saw this picture, which I think was taken by Edward Curtis of the Navajo. I said, I have to go there. I don't know why. I have to go. And I eventually went there. I just stood there. I didn't say anything for like an hour. I just stood there. I looked at this thing and went, wow. And I could hear people dancing around me. Literally, I started joining in the actual tone, even though I don't speak Navajo. And I found myself speaking in the language that they were actually chanting around me. It was the most incredible thing. You can't make this stuff up. It's part of the process of, again, waking up who you really are and all those things that you've denied all your life. We all have this ability. But why? Why does it do this? Well, because this particular mountain happens to occupy a geomagnetic hotspot to begin with. And secondly, it also occupies a gravitational anomaly. And we know that where the gravity behaves a little bit different on the face of the Earth, it starts to influence your state of consciousness. So that's what I mean about tuning into the environment. You don't have to be a genius or a physicist to understand this and get a picture from space to know where the hotspots are. You just go there, sense the tingly-wingly, and you go, oh, well, that's interesting, yeah. And you're suddenly connected, and you just let it go. This may explain what drives certain pilgrims to risk their lives on China's most sacred mountain, Huashan, to get to the hotspot. Can you imagine doing this? If you let go of that rope on the vertical cliff, the next unyielding surface is 8,000 feet below you. And this is what people will go to, the lengths they will go to actually reach the sacred site on top of this mountain. And at this point, the piece of wood is actually gone. You actually go and have to walk on a chain. So obviously something has fallen at some point. Not to put you off, you know. And they do it to reach this shrine in the middle of nowhere, which just happens to coincide with a gravitational and geomagnetic anomaly. And again, the shrine is perched right there on the very edge, where they could have just taken it 100 feet over here and been perfectly capable of being within the range of, the health and safety department. But no, we're going to put it right here on the edge of the cliff. Why? Because that's where the energy is full, and that's what we come here for. So this is why some temples, when you're traveling around the world, you go, why is this damn building so inconveniently located? Well, now we know why. Because they're marking the X that you can't see with your normal vision. For example, there's this one, Hassan Kung Su, and it's literally built from where the picture was taken on a river plain, and it's been bolted to the side of a vertical mountain. You think, what was the architect smoking? You could have built it here as a flat plane. Oh no, we're going to go all the way up there. We're going to bolt the wood to the side of this vertical cliff because that is where the energy of the tiger is flowing through the landscape. It just happens to be there. So we're going to build up there, not down here with the river, which even though it's the river of the gods, there's something even greater than the gods, and that is the source of where everything comes from. So they're very serious about locating these hotspots. So if you ever find yourself traveling and you think, why is this here? Go there, because it's telling you that's where you're going to feel a little bit different. Now, at some point during our migration through the planet Earth, we began to lose contact with a subtle way of things. We began to move to cities. We began to be enamored and falling in love and having sex with your cell phone. And believe me, that'll be coming next. So we began to lose that connection, and we began to lose the ability to sense these portals. So we began to mark them with very, very large rocks. This, by the way, is in France, in Dole. And it's not even a big rock. And I remember taking a group there, and people got out of the little minibus, and they That's a big rock. I said, no, 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 that's not a big rock. That's just foreplay. The big rock is down the road. It's twice as big as this. It took 16 people holding hands to cover the girth of the stone, just to give you a sense of the scale of what we're dealing with here. And the thing is, these big stones were, again, marking the hotspots of energy on the land. But the thing is, everywhere you go around the planet where you hear the stories of the folklore regarding these monoliths, they refer to these rocks as living, breathing organisms. They're not just rocks, they're alive. They breathe in, they breathe out, and it does something to the agricultural product of the vicinity whenever you sow seeds anywhere near these things. So there's something electromagnetic going on. And to prove the point that this small rock was more than the sum of its parts, I actually asked the people in my group, I said, look, we don't just come to these sites to look and take pictures and take selfies. We come here to also add a little bit of ourselves to water the sacred site, because the power of prayer, intention, or toning with your voice, using the power of the voice to carry the intention, it's remembered by the stone and the quartz in the stone. It's a bit like the computer. If I click G, I'm going to get a G on my keyboard because the screen is made of silica, which is quartz, and an electrical current went from the keyboard to the screen, and now I'm getting an image. It's the same thing with the stone. You just have to think a little bit differently. So I said, look, we're just going to hold hands right next to the stone, and we're going to tone a note of affection, a phrase of love, of gratitude to the stone, and see what happens. Okay. So there's a guy that's sitting with us. He's a bit uncomfortable. And I said, Rob, what do you think? Well, I was raised Catholic. I said, well, we're not here to judge anybody. It's no big deal. Well, I'm a bit uncomfortable with this pagan ritual. I said, well, you just said it out. And by the way, why are you on my tour? I was curious. That's good. You're curious. That's good. Well, just sit here. The French are ever so good about sacred sites. They always put a picnic table near them so you can have your saucisson, your baguette, while watching a large rock. They're very romantic. And I said, well, just sit here. And at that moment, I sort of had the management came in and said, you want to start dowsing right here? I said, really? Okay. So I usually use the dowsing rod just to show people what I'm picking up so that they don't think that I'm making stuff up. And I just put it down next to one of the rods down into the ground next to where he was sitting. That's it, left it there. Took the next rod and I said, I'm going to show you the energy field, the ripple of energy around this menhir before we do anything. Because each stone has its own soul. It's called like a big ripple of energy. So wherever I walk towards the stone, when it reaches the edge of the perimeter of the energy field, it will move. And suddenly, 90 degrees, boof. There it is. It's about 6 feet away from the stone. That's the soul of the stone. Now, we're going to go hold hands, talk to the stone, and do some toning. So we're there for about 10 minutes concentrating, putting in the love into the stone. And at one moment, there's a note that just hit, and it even hurt your ear. It's like, oh, that's nice. And I heard this thud behind me. It's like, oh, that sounds painful. I wonder what just happened. And we kept doing it, and we stopped about 15 minutes later. Everybody's sweating like crazy. And it's like, whoa. And you can start seeing things in like you got LSD or something. Everything's in bright color. And people are just shaking. They're in awe. And I said, well, let's see if we've had an effect on the energy field from what we've just done. So I went back with my rod, and I went right past the 6-foot marker. And it kept going and going and going, and the rod bends again exactly where I put down the first rod, which was 30 feet away, right next to the guy who has been sitting on the bench, who's now flat on his back. And I said, what the hell happened to you? I said, well, bring him up, raising the dead. What happened to you? Well, there's a moment where you hit a certain note, and it's like this wave of energies went this way. Just knocked me right over. I said, well, look at where you're standing. This is the edge of the energy field. He goes, when's the next sacred site? Converted. Hallelujah. Yeah, that's how you do it. Slowly, by demonstration. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, move on. You're not throwing your ideas onto anybody. That's the way you do it. But the thing is, the energy can be measured in more scientific terms. I was walking past this bucket and spade store in Carnac in France, and I had that distinct smell of paper, old paper, at the back of the store. this is how my life is. You know, I walk around town looking for a place to eat, and I go, old paper, there's a book in here. And you walk in, and Monsieur, can I help you? No, 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 no. And I got this book at the back of the store, and it's like a little pamphlet by Pierre Méreau. And he wrote a book called Les pierres sont vivantes, which means the stones are alive. And I went, oh, hello. He did an actual survey of the stones around Karnak, the menhirs, the dolmens, everything, as a skeptical electrical engineer who said, I wonder if the New Age people are full of woo-woo, or are they really tapping into an energy? Let's go and find out. So to cut a very long story short, he basically figured out, after years of research, prodding his equipment into the stones, that the stone circles concentrate energy by the very nature of their design. They attract it from the local landscape. The menhirs, the big tall stones, act like big accumulators, like big big accumulators. And the dolmens, which is what this is, behave like a coil. So depending on the way you shape the design of the stone in the temple, the energy is attracted and stored in a different way. But it does attract the energy, and it stores it to a point where it recycles every 70 minutes. So this is his research. So, and he was very adamant about it, that if you go there at the wrong time and the energy has not grounded itself, you will get an electric shock. And I can guarantee you, it really works, because being the curious guy that I am, because I like to talk about experience, not just say, I read this from so-and-so. I actually want to go there, I want to lick it, touch it, feel it, eat it. I'm a Taurian, it's what I do. And I thought, this stone wants to talk, and I knew damn well it was going to hurt, and I couldn't feel my arm for like 15 minutes. One hell of a belt. It's like, ow. Down with that hand now. So, and the ripples, he said, the ripples around these stones can be as much as 36 feet radius. The soul of the stone goes out for quite a long distance. So, encouraged by what the skeptic was doing, I began to go around Europe doing my own dowsing of these stones, again, just to extend the information. Because his work corresponds to the dowsing maps I have been doing of menhirs around Portugal, Scotland, and Britain. This is one of the maps, by the way. So the big dot in the center, that's the stone from above, and those are the ripples of energy that are vibrating from this particular stone, which is in the eastern part of Portugal. In fact, I was just there doing a documentary. But what I was amazed by was the fact that the ripples of energy on this particular day, the ridges, weren't haphazard. The ratio of the space between each ripple is defined by this invisible pentagonal framework of geometry. And I thought, wow, I never saw that coming. So I figured, oh, we can take this a stage further. Because when I was living in Wiltshire in England, in Crop Circle Central, in between Avebury and Stonehenge, and believe me, when you live in this particular place and you're surrounded by giants' graves, and I mean giants' graves where people are actually buried, which are 8.5 feet tall, by the way, you go there with a sandwich in the afternoon and a notepad to write your next chapter, you are spoiled beyond belief. You know, it's like, yeah, shall I write at the pub? Shall I write at home? Shall I go and sit with the sheep in the field? Nah, I think I'll go to Avebury or a giant's grave. And there's nobody there. You got the whole place to yourself. So there was one particular mound, and we have them here in America as well, like in the Ohio Valley, the Mississippi Valley. We've got thousands of mounds here in America. 80% of all the mounds that have been excavated in America, there was no one buried in them. But they are burial sites, according to academia. Only about 20% were actually deemed to be burial places. And they found the bones. Smithsonian found the bones of people who are about 8.5 feet tall, with elongated skulls, and the rest is a conspiracy theory, because the bones disappeared, and bye-bye, you never get to hear about it ever again. So I went to one of these mounds not far from Avebury Stone Circle to measure the energy field over the course of a year. So every 2 weeks, in fact, I've got a movie for you. Here we go. There's the mound from above. These ripples are me measuring the ripples every 2 weeks, okay? So the blue are the feminine polarity, red is masculine. See how they breathe in and out every 2 weeks? Sometimes there's more ripples, sometimes there's less. They expand, they contract. Again, this is what they're saying. These places are living, breathing organisms. That's a lunar eclipse, by the way. But what I was not ready was that each time I did the transcription onto the computer, the spatial relationship of those ripples encodes geometry. And the place where you see that in nature is upstairs. the ratio in the orbits of the planets can be defined by invisible geometric matrices. So the geometry of the orbits of the planets is translated down here on Earth as well. That is cool. I didn't know that was possible, and I just did it on a whim for a whole year when you got nothing better to do than do a bit of writing, look at cows and sheep, and go dowsing a mound, because that's what you do. Oh, and drink at the pub as well. Or as we call them, research facilities. A lot of heavy research is done. So this is we're looking at the language of nature. This is how nature communicates with itself, and it communicates with us. Because if you look at the human body under an electron microscope, at the minutiae of what makes us who we are, all our cells are also geometric in shape as well. So we are looking at us on the landscape. That's why there's that connection between the two. Now, marking these energy hotspots became a bit of a hobby for our ancestors, and especially in Britain, where it's been heavily studied. And I don't know why we have this bigger range of study than anywhere else on the planet. I guess because everybody's very eccentric up there. But there are two energy currents that flow like two serpents across from the eastern corner of Britain down to the southwest corner of Cornwall. And it's marked by hundreds of ancient sites. And wherever they cross, wherever these two electromagnetic energies cross on the landscape, you'll find a Gothic cathedral, a Celtic church, a mound, stone circles, Stonehenge, and so forth. So someone did us the favor of marking the invisible currents because they knew we'd forget. So now, when you're feeling disconnected from the source, you go to one of these places and you connect with the source. You become a sorcerer. Some people might know about this project. It took 15 years, a dowser and a researcher to map this out, and it was based on local folklore. The folk memory told you that the alignment of the temples in southern Britain follow a near-perfect straight line, which it does when you see it from about 5 miles up in space. The points suddenly take on a near-perfect spike through the landscape. So these are the nodes of Britain, and the best part is the entire length aligns to the Beltane sunrise on May the 1st. So when that rises over the North Sea, it sends a shadow, a path of light, an electromagnetic pathway of light, and it lights up all the sacred sites all the way to Cornwall. And women to this very day, especially in Wiltshire, on Beltane, they actually get up at the crack of dawn, take their clothes off, build a sacred flame, and they jump over the sacred flame to honor the birth of the land, the fertility of the land, so that we can have, well, a bountiful harvest at the end of the summer. Still goes on to this very day. Only time of the year when the farmers get up at the crack of dawn with binoculars, I don't know why. Like, look at that war. Yeah, the farmers in Britain are perverts. The same story appears in Britain throughout Europe as well. It was remembered that there's this two major pathways of electromagnetic current that go from the corner of Ireland all the way down to Mount Megiddo in Israel, or Palestine, depending on your political inclination. And it covers over 800 sacred sites, and some of them have been superimposed from era to era. So the Gothic cathedrals stand on top of the old sites as well. And it kind of follows the general path of the winter solstice sunrise, when the energy of the sun suddenly overwhelms the darkness of winter, and it rejuvenates the whole spine of Europe. Again, this is 20 years of research, literally going with a bent coat hanger through Europe, not knowing where they're going, and coming across all of these temples. And when you did the research, it turns out, yeah, they form a straight line all the way through the spine of Europe. And how cool is that? And also the best part is, each of the masculine energy lines were marked by places dedicated to the Archangel Michael or his local doppelganger. And the feminine lines were either Mary, the church is dedicated to Mary, or Isis, or Magdalene. So whoever was working in the Celtic Christian church also understood this. And that's why they gave the names to the church. So if you're in a church that's like 2,000 years old and it's named to Mary, that's the Isis tradition, and that will be a feminine site that it's marking. So that's just to get you an idea for when you travel. If you don't know much about the spaces that you're traveling to, if you look at the name of the building, it tells you exactly the energy that you're standing on. Now, the Egyptians were great observers of all this stuff, and to the degree where the laws of nature were distilled and then hardwired into the fabric of the temple to achieve a desired effect. That's why, despite the fact they may look very similar, each temple feels very, very different to the next, because they are designed to waken up a part of your body that the next temple won't do, and vice versa. So each site is eliciting a specific effect on your senses and your nervous system. If you go to the Osirian at Abydos, which I think I covered yesterday, this previous temple that behaved like a big womb on the face of the Nile, if you actually look at the construction and the geometry that you don't see but you can sense, the positioning of the pillars, the thickness of the walls, the architraves, everything is defined by this invisible mirroring of pentagons, and that's the symbol of the divine feminine. And if you were awake yesterday for the presentation, I proved that this site has nothing to do with Osiris, and it's all to do with Isis. There's your divine feminine. So now we know the geometry is hardwired into... You got plague? You should spread that and see how quickly that gathers strength on Facebook. If you hear someone sneezing, they've got the plague. No, I won't go there. But you see how it works. The mythology of the temple that's based on the divine feminine, the geometry of the divine feminine is hardwired into the structure of the actual temple itself. But you won't know that unless you're a geometer. And it took Keith Critchlow, a famous geometer, to actually point that out. So if you'd move the rocks another inch or two this way, the geometry would not work. It would be a completely different format, completely different feel. And as the religion starts getting a grip all over the world and organizing things into you're right, you're wrong, and only we can connect with God, and you have to pay us money to connect you with the very being that gave you life, everything starts falling apart. So this information goes underground by the Middle Ages, and especially in Europe, where it was very dangerous to build temples like this. So what did they do? They built Gothic cathedrals, and the people that were responsible for these incredible skyscrapers were the Knights Templar and the Cistercian monks, essentially the same people. And they borrowed all the information from the Muslims in the Middle East when they're out in Jerusalem getting information from under the Temple of Solomon, which is another story. So they brought back this understanding of sacred site from the Middle East, whether it had been used for thousands of years. The problem is, how do you build a pyramid or a temple in a time period when the church ruled everything? And if you didn't do what you were told, you end up with this horrible sensation of burning flesh on a burning pyre. You don't want that. So what they were very smart in doing is approaching the Pope and saying, Papa, we have noticed there's not many buildings being built to the glory of God. Of course, they didn't tell you which God they were honoring. Not the God that's a Catholic or Christian or Muslim. No, it's the God, the source that doesn't care who you are, because we're all creatures of God. We're going to build these temples dedicated to God, and you're going to like these. They've got these spires, they've got a cruciform shape, which shows the veneration for the moment when Christ was crucified and was resurrected. They were great bullshit artists, the Templars. And the Pope swallowed the whole story, hook, line, and sinker, and even gave him a bag of money to build these buildings. The Templars didn't need any money, they had money. They said, oh, thank you, a bit of money as well, great. So, and you thought that was the end of the story. But if you go to Chartres Cathedral in France, which is the most famous of them, and it's certainly the most well-studied, it sits on 4 previous temples. People have been going there since about 3,500 BC at least, because the original temple is about 2 floors under the main building. And if you're very lucky, you'll still see part of it. First of all, it was built on a limestone promontory in Chartres, and we know what happens when water percolates through limestone. It creates a natural electrical current called absorption. And there's also a big river that flows like a big shepherd's crook under the actual limestone promontory. So that's the diagram, the big shepherd's crook, that's the underground river course. And while the water moves under there, there's an electrical current percolating up to the original temple, which is a big passage mound with lots of big stones. And then the Visigoths added their temple, the Romans added the temple, and then later came the building that we know and love very well in this wonderful cross shape. But all the veins of water, including the underground movement of water, are all being attracted like a big spider towards the center of the building, which is a place called the altar. Okay? There's a reason why we call things the way they are. But the best part about what the Templars were doing is that their cruciform shape, it literally hides the pathway of a long feminine current and a masculine current that makes a node right under the spire of the building. Very clever. They were hiding the energy by the very width and length of the building. So this is what I mean about things being hidden literally in front of your own eyes, pretending to be a Catholic building. They didn't care about Catholicism or Christianity. They wanted everybody to be equal. They wanted you to share in sacred space. And the way that they began to enhance the space was by enhancing the concealed geometry in the very design. Because the building is dedicated to Notre Dame, which is Mary Magdalene, essentially, the divine bride at the end of the Christian era. So the framework of the building actually encodes a massive pentagram. And if you look very carefully of where the pentagrams meet, it goes right to the eye of the famous labyrinth. If you move that labyrinth 1 foot that way, it doesn't work. And I always wondered, I had special permission to be there one night with nobody in the building, in the labyrinth, sitting there going, why are you here? And it's like this image just drops down of these pentagrams connected to each other. Oh, this is the source of the geometry. Bingo. So this is how it works. It wasn't in a book. It literally just hit me physically on the head and went, well, idiot, just look at the geometry. Because it takes in the perimeter of the geometry, takes in the top of the building, the transepts, and the crossing points, taking the apse as well. So again, you may be looking at a cruciform shape, but the actual geometric shape, you're sitting in a big pentagram. But that's just the main building. The interior of the building does something else. This is a simplified diagram. Now you have the divine masculine, and that hexagonal framework takes in all the pillars of the actual building. So it's the connection between the ground and the sky. That's your masculine. The basis is your feminine. It's the divine marriage in one place. But one part is still missing, which is the altar and the head of the building, the halo of the building. That took a bit while longer to figure out. You have to walk in, walk out, go back again next day, come back a week later, and start looking at things that don't add up. Like 2 pillars in the middle of the building that go, wait a minute, these pillars shouldn't be there in the way they are unless they're trying to tell you something. And I thought, oh, okay, that's the basis for a third geometry, which is the 7-pointed star. It's the geometry of the soul, okay? It's the geometry of the angle of the slope of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And it's also the star that connects the horseshoe shape where the altar of the building is. That's where you go to be altered. That's where the energy is congregating. You see how clever this is? But it also, the points of the geometry fit the halo of the building with its 7 chapels, and it's an honoring of the goddess of divine buildings, the Egyptian goddess Seshat. And only the Templars would know that because they were there learning all this stuff. So you got 5, 6, and 7 in a building that, to all intents and purposes, looks like a cruciform shape. That's how they got away with creating the combination of harmonics to create a unified, energetic environment under the nose of the Catholic Church. Smart people. I'm in awe of these people. I really, really am. Enter the Russians, who are bloody clever people. They're light years ahead of the planet when it comes to metaphysical, scientific work. And so little of this information ever comes out of the Soviet Union. And I had the chance to meet a couple of guys who are actually doing research in the Gothic cathedrals, monitoring people's brainwaves. And I thought, hello. And I said, yes, my friend, we are going to monitor your brainwaves when you stand in the main aisle, and we are going to get the people to, I know it's a terrible accent, but I'm going to do it anyway. We are going to get people to sing Gregorian chant, because that was the pop music of the day, and the buildings were designed for Gregorian chant. And I said, cool. So what happens? I said, well, something really weird happens. When you stand with your spine upright like an antenna in the Gothic cathedrals and you sing Gregorian chant and you mean it, your brain waves suddenly go 4,000% above normal waking state. And I went, I'm sorry, was that a typo? I said, no, 4,000%. You literally are connecting with the mind of the Creator. Wow, I can't wait for this to be published. And I don't know if it ever did. They vanished, probably because they were right. You know how it works. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. So finally, we know what's happening to people in there. It's not a figment of your imagination. The building is designed to allow for an altered state of consciousness. And the same thing was also being done in some of the stone circles in Britain by die-hard scientists who, again, are trying to make people like us look stupid. And the end result is that they will borrow a 30,000 piece of equipment called what was it? A magnetometer, and they'd drag it along the ground through the stone circle, and they would get a computer readout in the machine outside the stone circle. So the diagram you see here is the actual machine being dragged along the ground, picking up the spiral of energy, entering the free stones that form a gap that forms the entrance. That's why it's called the entrance. You are being entranced because you're stepping on a ribbon of electromagnetic current that's being dragged into the center of the stone circle like a big spiral. It's a bit like doing Alice in Wonderland. You're going down the rabbit hole at the center. That's an actual scientific experiment. In fact, I've got a quote from the scientist right here. They were astonished because they thought that we're going to make look really foolish, and quite the opposite happened. The average intensity of the geomagnetic field within the stone circle was significantly lower than that measured outside, as if the stones acted as a kind of shield. Yeah, outside those stones, normal space. Inside the stones, you're in sacred space. So they took it a stage further. Some bright spark decided to gather hundreds of electrodes and plant them all around Stonehenge. And I mean, they were everywhere, absolutely everywhere, inside the temple, outside the temple. And the idea was to find out what's going on electrically around Stonehenge throughout the day. Because people want to come here in the morning, they're dressed like druids, and they go, oh, rah, are they mad or are they picking up something? Well, turns out that the earthen mound and the ditch that's barely visible now after 8,000 years of Stonehenge, and by the way, the original Stonehenge was put up in 8000 BC. They don't want to mention that very well. I've got the information on that. They published it one week, and next week it disappeared. I thought, I'm glad I picked that up on that. So the original stones were there by 8000 BC. But what they found was that the mound and the ditch that surrounds the stone circle, it conducts a natural current into that ditch. It concentrates that current like a big vortex and then releases it via the entrance, which is the big horseshoe shape of Stonehenge, and it doubles the frequency of the surrounding landscape. And they can't work out how a bunch of rocks arranged in this manner can attract the electrical current of, let's say here where we're standing, circulate it around the ditch, and right at dawn, a gateway opens and the frequency goes in at twice the current. We don't understand how it works. It's just there, and it can be proved, as you can see in the diagram. They went up the road to Avebury, which is the world's biggest stone circle. Not much of it left. The ditch is very much still there, and it's big enough to actually house a village and a pub. Research facility. Yes. This is where I used to live, actually, not far from here. Totally spoiled. And they found something else very incredible about Avebury. They found that the magnetic readings actually die away each night to a far greater level than it can be accounted for under natural circumstances. It's as if the temple is going to sleep. And then in the morning, the readings start coming back up again at sunrise. They get charged back towards the site with the ground current from all the land attracted to the ditch at the same moment that the magnetic fluctuations inside the temple reach their maximum point. So this is why people want to go there at the crack of dawn. They sense that there's something very energetically powerful. And they're absolutely right. We can now measure this stuff. Even the stones that make up the two avenues that lead into Avebury, this is the processional avenue, because you don't just walk into Avebury, you've got to prepare yourself, you've got to prepare your mind and body, and you go down what's left of these standing stones that form this beautiful serpent-like ribbon, and you think, well, didn't the ancients, weren't they smart enough to do things in straight lines? Well, when was the last time you saw energy flowing in a straight line? Never. It behaves like this. What you're seeing here is the stones are marking the edge of the telluric current that's flowing like this, and over the lip of that hill is the first time you get to see the stone circle, because the stone circle is protected from view, okay, by a big, big ditch. You can't see the stones at all. You have to go in through the entrance, and then you see the stones, because you have to prepare mentally. You can't take your bullshit in there with you. All your bullshit, your intentions, your feelings, If you're not balanced, it's going to undermine the integrity of the energy of the temple. So the idea is to walk down the processional avenue, mind your thoughts, be aware of your thoughts. You know, someone just sold my chariot. I can't afford insurance. How am I going to pay the bills? My girlfriend left me. My boyfriend left me. I haven't got a boyfriend. I haven't got a girlfriend. Put that at the door. Leave it outside. It has nothing to do with the temple. You want to walk in balanced. And then you walk into the temple, and then the current is pushing you in that way. If you ever go there, and you walk this way from where I'm taking the photograph, you're walking against the current. And believe me, it's like walking against a fast-moving stream, and it feels like it's taking you twice as long to get back to your car. And it really is, because the current is flowing that way into the actual site. Try it, because it's good to experience these things, to know that it's not just my point of view. So if you follow the current into the actual center where all the energy moves into Avebury, this is what's left of it. There used to be 3 stones, and it's dry up here. It concentrates inside these 3 stones that behaves like a cove. It's a corruption of the word cave, and there used to be 3 sites there. All the energy concentrates behind this stone, which looks like a big fat earth mother, and that's where you do your otherworldly work. You go in there, connect with the energy, connect with the ancestors, and people leave you alone. The funny thing is, to mark the fact that the energy, this is where the spot where it happens, if you happen to be feeling a little bit off that day, they left you a little message, because can you see the serpent and the head? There's the head of the serpent, and there's the body of the serpent. It tells you that's where the serpent energy happens to be. And that's after 4,000 years of erosion. The serpent is still carved on the actual stone. That's pretty cool. So in case you can't feel it, look for the symbol. It's right there. Nearby, it's an incredible landscape. I mean, you can spend a whole week around Avebury and you'll never be bored. There are footpaths everywhere. You won't find anyone. No traffic. Birds, sheep. Even the pub is hard to find. Horrible. Panic sets in. Just around the corner is this enormous pregnant belly or an erect nipple, depending on your point of view. It's Silbury Hill. It literally means the hill of the shining people. The guys we met yesterday, and the divine goddess, the Isis, these are the shining ones. And what happens is that it's Europe's largest man-made mound, not a pyramid, the largest man-made mound. And the energy is built in such a way that it's not just a bunch of dirt piled up like a gopher hole. It's piled up very carefully in alternate layers of organic and inorganic material, and you're creating what essentially an orgone accumulator. If you're familiar with Wilhelm Reich, you'll know what I'm talking about. So you've got this incredible round mound where the energy accumulates throughout the day, and throughout the month it will build up to a point where it discharges. And I remember being there when I first moved there, making friends with the farmers because they're so much more aware of things. And I said, what do you know about Silva? I said, oh, very interesting it be, because that's the way they talk there. I said, it'd be very interesting. If you come here at the right time of the month, the hill gives out a cosmic fire. Excuse me? A cosmic fire. You mean the hill farts? Yes. You'll see a big ball of light coming up from the summit, and with a big halo. I said, okay, right, the cosmic fart. Well, a few days later, it was about the third cycle of the full moon. I happened to be driving by Silbury from the furthest field, and I just looked over, and there it was. Rising out of the summit was a cosmic fart, a massive, about 20 foot wide green ball of light with an orange halo around it. I went, oh my God. Drove like a European at 95 miles per hour down a 20-mile-an-hour road. Got there just in time for it to go poof. Yeah, so it builds up during the month. It takes in all the energy under the building, which is limestone. It sits on 6 springs, so the electrical current is already palpable, and it builds up and circulates like a spiral, and when it gets to the top, and it builds up, it goes poof. It's a beautiful sight, and it happens very regularly. So this is nothing new, by the way. This was happening in 4,500 BC when it was built on August the 1st. There's an actual date for it, because they found the flies buried at the very center of the hill that only germinate on August the 1st. So now we know the date when it was actually built. But this knowledge of energy manipulation on the land goes back at least 12,000 years. And I spoke about that yesterday when this global plan by the gods, the flood gods, brought this understanding of creating and manipulating energy to create powerful temples around the world. So this is one of the last times they actually built this, because after this, everything starts falling apart. There's climate change, there's warfare. By the time we get to the Bronze Age in 1300 BC, everything's fallen apart, and we're in the state of affairs that we are today. But as you've probably noticed, things are falling apart again, and we're now going from the bottom, going back up again. So there is good news, people. We are now headed towards the next level of ascension, and we may just live through the next 10 years of this barbarity that's going on around the world. But it's really down to us. It's like the Hopi said, or is it Gandhi? Be the change you wish to see. So when people say, when is this going to happen? Well, how long are you prepared to wait? Tomorrow? Week? Generation? It's up to us to actually move the whole thing forward through our collective consciousness. Do we want a better world? Yeah, of course we do. We want a more modern society? Of course we do. We want to basically respect everybody. Okay, let's work on it. Let's get it done. Because I don't know about you, but Earth hurts. It's painful. It's full of prickly things, snakes, girlfriends. My case, anyway. But you know what I mean. It's challenge. It's a challenging thing down here. And I don't think I've wanted to come all this way from wherever I came from to incarnate for how many years I'm going to live, to have a hard time and not feel that I've made a change and contributed to making a positive change. And I hope everybody else feels the same way, because that's how we're going to get through this. And we will do. We've been through all this before. So, second part of this conversation. It has long been the view that when you interact with what they call these navels of the earth, because that's where the power is, whenever you refer to a place called the navel of the earth, that's where you get a major electrical current going in there, and it's powerful. When you interact with these places, you are accessing the other world, and whether it's a complex temple or a simple standing stone, the location on the junction of the Earth's currents acts as a bridge between material and ethereal, and it becomes a place where the two realities interpenetrate each other. That's why they're very important and worth maintaining. Kind of like the picture of this guy at Saksai Waman, still scratching his head going, how the hell did he build that? The interaction with sacred space basically leads to greater awareness of the subtle universe. And when you're aware of the subtle universe, you're aware of yourself and your place in it. That's one of the main reasons why they built this stuff, so that you remember who you are when you get distracted by shiny things or big houses and all other things, and the home shopping network and things like that. You lose track of who you really are. And a close bond with the laws of nature enables anyone under the right conditions to control those laws. You can actually control the laws to the point where your body's abilities become much more amplified. So anybody can do this. You just have to want to do it, you have to be curious, and you have to experiment a little bit. And that's one of the things that was said about the old gods, and that's what differentiated the gods from hunter-gatherers. They had control of the laws of nature, and they could bend the rules of nature within the rules themselves. If you don't believe that, ask the Hopi and the Navajo with the rain-making ceremonies. There's a very famous one years ago in Santa Fe where there was a big drought for years. A friend of mine got taken up to one of the sacred hills. I think it was Sikumu outside of Santa Fe. And the Navajo said, wait here, white guy. I'm going to go to the top of the hill. I'm going to make rain. Okay. And he walks around 7 times, he chants, comes back down the hill. Great, I'm first, let's go for a drink. Okay. So they went down to the local pub, and suddenly there's a news flash. Red, warning light. Major low cell depression over Santa Fe County. Seek high ground. It's going to wash away cars, cows, houses. And it did. Big derecho. And my friend turns to the Navajo guy and says, that is a really impressive way of demonstrating that you have control of the laws of nature and how to bend the rules. But tell me, have you actually worked out how much rain to ask for? He says, we haven't figured that one out yet. I love them. They got the best sense of humor. But simple demonstration. You can control the laws of nature, and you can bend the rules if your intention is aligned to the local spirit of place. So no wonder many of these temples are described as places where the ordinary person can be transformed into a god. Okay, so the more you travel to these places, even around here in the middle of nowhere, there are places where the native people used to and still venerate. Make friends with them, find out where they are, go and sit on them, because that's what those power spots are there to do. The Taoists in Asia will remind you that the reason why you do this is to awaken the great person inside. That's a great quote. Awaken the great person inside you. What are you waiting for? Don't hold it back, let it go. And the Egyptians actually took this a stage further. They described the process and the purpose of the temple as a kind of an insurance policy. And they refer to the temple, and this is a direct quote from the building texts, "Whosoever shall make a copy of the vault of the sky and make a copy upon the earth, it shall act as a magical protector for them in heaven and on earth, unfailingly, regularly, and eternally." So in other words, if you design a temple that's based on the laws of nature and make a physical expression of those invisible laws using rocks, the building serves as a kind of alchemical point of transformation because it's based on the very laws upon which the earth is founded, and you can't get any closer to reality than that. So the reason why you see these things as being perfect when you approach them, and they are, when you approach Edfu, for example, at 5 in the morning, I had to pay the guards special money just to keep 40,000 tourists away. And believe me, I own the police in Edfu. It only cost me $15 to buy the police force. I thought, yeah. And they need the money. They're not well paid. And they love me because I respect them. You know, even though they're Muslims, I show my respect. And I said, we just want to come here and respect the temple. We want to bring some flowers. And we want to honor the site. And we don't want 40,000 tourists here. And here is a little bit of bakshish. And here's a little something for your wonderful wife. And can we be here at 5 in the morning? Of course, my friend. And they're all there with their guns all polished, you know. And there's like massive horde of people beyond the gates going, and we're going, God, special. Not really. No, we walked in quietly and gently, and you can hear the temple, and we put the flowers down. I actually take a little scarf, clean the dirt off this big statue of Horus, because that's who I'm working with in there. That's the representation of the God who feeds so much of my information. I go there, and Horus has got that frown. It's like, oh, fucking tourist. And no one cleans him, and I get my thing out. I said, sorry, Horus, I'm sorry about the tourist. I get the dust off, and he feels better already. And that's the experience. So, and you look at the building and think, it's perfect. Yes, it is perfect, because it's a representation of the very mathematical proportions that you find in nature. That's why it looks fantastic. Stonehenge is another one. It looks good. Yeah, it does. Not because the architect was a genius. It's because he just looked at nature and said, let's do what nature does and build it with these proportions using large rocks. But it's not just that. It's the inherent symbolism that also describes their purpose. And that's when you go deeper into the meaning of the temple. So if you ever go to Central America, and specifically around Guatemala and Yucatan, which I should point out is not Mexico. There's Mexico and then there's Yucatan. It's a different frame of mind than the Yucatan, totally. If you go down to Chichen Itza, which is one of my favorite places, you will look very carefully at the staircases going up to these pyramids. Everybody's taking selfies of the big pyramid of Kukulkan, of course, because it looks good on Facebook. Around the corner, there's this lovely little pyramid. Nobody goes there. They've already got their pictures. They're going, oh, another pyramid. You've missed the best thing, because it's the smaller things that don't attract attention that are most important. Here you'll see 2 serpents, and you see the heads of the serpents at the bottom of the staircase. 2 serpents, and the architrave of the actual staircase are 2 coils, not one. So I don't know about you. I've never met any snake, and I hope I don't, because I have a phobia of snakes. I've never met a snake that has 2 coils. They have 1 coil, not 2. And it tells you that the serpent is the position where the electromagnetic current rides up the building. And you look very carefully between the 2 coils, there's an eye carved into the actual rock. What it's telling you is, if you go into this building, the electromagnetic current gives you the vision to peer into the other world. That's the secret language of the temple. So it turns out, and again, I picked this up just by sitting there having an apple, of all things, by myself, and I thought, now how did they get in? There's no entrance. They appeared at the top. They must have come from underneath. So I conferred with my good friend, the Maya teacher, Miguel Angel Vergara, who knows everything. And I said, Miguel, without saying anything, did they approach the pyramids from below into the cave representing the Divine Mother, prepare, go for an umbilical cord into the center of the chamber, which is where it is. There's a chamber right in the middle of this building, and then they'd reappear resurrected at the top. It was part of an initiation. And I said, how did you know? I said, I got an image. Well, here's the image. That's exactly how it happened. They would take a little boat, because all the rivers in the Yucatan are underwater. There's no rivers above ground in the Yucatan, thanks to the big meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. It created all of these holes where the water goes into. So you're going, punting, very romantic, punting the initiate into the sacred cave, and you prepare. You go for an umbilical cord for the center of the pyramid. There's your initiation chamber. And then when you're ready, 3 days later, you appear at the top and you go, I am a new person. And yes, you are. You are now the alchemical marriage. You have attained the symbol of resurrection of the individual, and you are reborn in the true image of what it's supposed to mean. And it wasn't just people to which this has happened. The way that the pyramids are designed, they send electrical current up to the platform. And people have always wondered, how did the Maya support such a huge population, built these incredible temple cities with such ability to feed them? Turns out that the locals always used to take the seeds in the midwinter, place the seeds on top of the platform, and the electrical current was driven to the top by the shape of the building, and the seeds were impregnated with electrical current, which means they were able to get 5 harvests, where most people would get 2 during the year. So that's now also been validated as well. So follow the folklore. Why would they make it up? If you make up some bullshit, you're going to die because it's not true. If it works, you remember the information in the folklore. That's why the folklore is so important. And again, just to reiterate, if you ever wondered why the most restricted part of any sacred building, including the church, is the altar, well, now you know, because the altar, as it was spelt in the old days, with an E, as in alter, means to transmute, to raise. And if you go to Europe, you look at the churches that are built on the old sacred sites, like here near Karnak, the altar of this church is built right over the original altar that's in the mound beneath it. So even though it's now a Christian church, you're picking up the energy of the original site, and people are still being altered in one way or another. So religion might change, but the current is still there, and that's much more important. And how do you maintain the integrity? Well, affirmation, prayer. Some people might go in there and have an Hail Mary and be very Christian. Okay, that's cool. But if you go in there and just connect with the spirit of place and say, right, I don't care about religion, I care about the spirit of place, the true being that has no denomination. It's not masculine, it's not feminine, it's everything. And you sit there, put some flowers, give it a thought of love, sing if you have to, and the site will go, thank you for honoring me. And that's how you replenish the energy, okay? So you leave a little bit of yourself, and you take a little bit when you leave, and you get a quid pro quo, and that's how this information keeps going from generation to generation. Very quiet. So if anybody ever tries to kick you out of a building because you're being woo-woo and pagan, just stand there with your eyes closed and pretend you're being a complete idiot. You say, I'm just getting a bit of sleep right now. And you're just doing your own little meditation, connecting with the energy of place, and then you leave. So there are all kinds of strange ways to do this. You can lie on the floor and mutter some strange language. That's cool as well. Actually, I find that when you behave really weird, people leave you alone. It's like they'll come up and prod you and say, look, I'm trying to get some cattle mutilations going here. Don't confuse me. Oh, shit, leave him alone. I said, good, it works. And sometimes when people... I hate to say this, but I actually like keeping a low profile. And I fly so much. There are people now on British Airways. The flight attendants actually know who I am. I go in and I go, your usual seat, Mr. Silva. I said, usual seat. Your usual pre-flight cocktail? Am I flying that much? Yes. Oh, we just saw your recent documentary. And the whole of the business class turns this way, because I can't fly economy, obviously. I'm too tall. The whole of business class said, keep your voice down. I don't want to have a stupid conversation with people for the next 5 or 6 hours. So what I usually do now, I take a book with a fake book cover of alien cattle mutilations, guaranteed. It keeps 95% of the world away from talking to me. You'd be reading poetry and Rumi or whatever, but for all intents and purposes, it's like, it works. Until you get someone from MUFON sitting next to you who goes, hey, you're one of the... Oh, fuck it. Didn't I see you in that conference? Oh, God. Sometimes you have a great conversation. It's just the way it is. But beyond that, beyond the affirmation, the transformation qualities of these sites are also due to the choice of stone. You may have noticed on some of these presentations that the stones weren't local. They were dragged sometimes as much as 400 miles away for an intended purpose. And you think, what were these people smoking? 400 miles? Use that rock. No, we want to make it really hard for ourselves. And I began to question this. Why? Why these stones above all others? And, after about 10 years, you begin to get the point. They're always packed with a lot of quartz, a lot of iron, and a lot of magnetite, the three main ingredients to all of these stones. And this, what happens is when you put the stones in a certain configuration, especially lots of them, it creates a kind of a magnetic field. Not a big magnetic field where it will destroy your equipment, but just enough to create an effect that actually directs its effects to the human body of anyone that enters these sacred sites. The first one, magnetite, it begins to influence the iron in your blood. Believe it or not, there's a lot of rust flowing through your body right now, which is why your blood is red. You literally are carrying iron in your blood. So that when you're affected by a lot of magnetite in the stones around you, it begins to affect the flow of blood through your blood vessels. So when you walk into these sites and you go, oh, I'm getting the tingly-winglies. Yes, you are, because all that content, that iron is suddenly being activated and it's flowing in a much more excitable pattern. And the transportation of oxygen in your body is also getting very excited. So you're starting to dehydrate and you're starting to see fairies. Yes, you are. You are literally seeing images of people on the next level of reality. It's actually absolutely true. That's the first level of interaction between the stone and the human body. The second one is that all that magnetism begins to influence all those millions of particles of magnetite that are sitting, floating in the liquid inside your skull. Believe it or not, there's a lot of magnetite in here. It's what allows you to orientate to magnetic north. Even though I know a lot of wives will disagree that their husbands don't know where the hell they're going, what's north, what's south, but it is true. You've got that magnetite in here so that when you start stimulating the magnetite, it affects the brainwave patterns, and the imagery that you're getting is not coming from your brain, it's your brain interpreting the imagery that's on the site, and it's trying to tell you what the site is trying to communicate you about. That's how it works. But there's one more. Wait, there's more. The pineal gland, yes, that little tiny little protuberance that looks like a little pine cone in the center of your brain. When you start activating that, whether through sound or through vibration or through electromagnetic patterning, as you are within, let's say, the Great Pyramid or a stone circle, it starts to vibrate the pineal gland, so it starts behaving like the tongue of a cobra. It goes from side to side like this. What's happening is that little tongue is connecting the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of your brain. And the moment that happens, there's a chemical reaction. And the chemical that's created is called DMT. And that is what facilitates your heightened state of imagery. So the images that you're getting are actually the interpretation of what's happening in the energy field of the sacred site. And if you pay attention to the images, they'll convey very important information. But the trick is you've got to ask what it is that you're looking for. You can't just walk in there and go, okay, hit me. Yeah, you'll get something. But if you go in there and say, well, I'm looking for the answer to something very specific, and you just let it go and you go, oh, that's interesting. And you remember it and you write it down, and then you've got to research it, and then you've got a book or a documentary. That's how it happens. Or you apply it in whatever way you want. So essentially, the temples are generating the correct neurological environment for accessing different levels of reality. And the effect is designed to help the body integrate more successfully into the temple's resonant environment. In other words, you and the temple have become one organism. It's no longer the stones and the rocks and you. You are now become one indivisible force. And that's when it gets really cool, because you can sense the actual walls of the temple, and you become the walls of the temple. You can feel the coldness of the stone and the wetness of the earth. It's an incredible experience. In fact, it's... Yeah, it is. It's almost like a drug. You can't get enough of it after a while. And I have people that I take to the Great Pyramid every year, and the experiences that they have, I don't tell them anything because I'll be prejudicing their outcome. I want them to experience it and tell me at dinner what they saw. And usually they'll see what I see because I know what's going on all the time in there. There's some very weird people in there, fun people, but they'll sense exactly what I picked up, but they validate my work as well. So it's a two-way street. So it does work. So the next logical question is, would this affect your DNA? Well, let's find out. With me so far? Yeah? Good. Lots of pictures. The mountain pyramids are all built, like I said, with alternating layers of organic and inorganic material, and it behaves like a filter. So in other words, all the exterior frequencies that you find and can measure, when you go inside these mounds, the weather is very, very different. The frequency, it goes down to about 4.8 hertz, which is about the frequency of a psychic or a healer when they're working. You're basically filtering out everything that shouldn't be there, concentrating it in a very specific environment. And the environment acts on the body, it restructures your electrical circuits, and it enables the individual to achieve equilibrium, mentally, physically, and also spiritually. So it's very important. But there's more. Your body and your state of being relies on the information gathered by your DNA. So your DNA is always seeking out, like a little sniffer dog, what's happening in your environment. If you change the local frequency of the electrical current around this room, your DNA will pick that up information and it sends it to all your cells. And you go, wait a minute, that's interesting. And you start to perceive something else with your inner vision. And the byproduct of the body's electrical fields adapts to a different rhythm. And when it does that, you start getting dehydrated as well, which is probably what's happening right now. And to demonstrate what's happening here visually, consider that in its normal state, your DNA spiral has an angle of rotation of 34.6 degrees. But when it's affected by the change of DNA and the information received by the electrical field around you, that state of rotation of the spiral changes to 32.72 degrees. And that angle, believe it or not, relates to gravity. And I know it might sound a bit strange that somehow, by interacting with sacred space, gravity is also working on your energy field. Consider this, and you can try this at home, by the way. This is the picture of my deck in Portland on a normal day in the summer, where the snow is, in the winter, when the snow is piling. I was looking out of the window having a cup of coffee and looking at the snow falling over a little round pebble. And I thought, that's interesting. Look at the way that snow keeps falling. And it's from this beautiful angle of 32.72 degrees. And I thought, I was just researching that about DNA. What the hell's going on here? And it's called the angle of repose. Engineers know about this. And they said, yeah, it's the way that gravity works on grains when they fall into anything. It could be sand, it could be salt on a table. Eventually, after the big mess, it starts to conform to a specific angle, and that angle is consistent. And I began to look at the shape on my deck, and I thought, I've seen this angle before. And I was going through my library of slides. They conform to the slope angle of virtually all sacred mountains on the planet, 32.72, whether it's up in Alaska, whether it's in Japan, or the famous mountain in New Zealand, Mount Taranaki, which is holy to the Maori. It's the same thing. And I began to research this concept of initiates who would climb holy mountains. And in Japan, they actually have a society of the mountain. People join the society of the mountain, and they said their purpose is to climb the mountain and to enter the mountain. I said, oh, is there like a cave or something, or a tunnel? No, you enter the mountain. Oh, you become the mountain. Yes. So for them, it's a spiritual concept. Traveling up to a sacred mountain, working with the angle of gravity, and then you become the mountain, and you come back enlightened when you come back down. And I began to stretch this a little further. I thought, is this what they mean in Freemasonry by the 33rd degree, that sacred number where if you ask people what it means, you die, they'll kill you? You know, I'm sorry, we have to kill you, Mr. Bond, you know too much. And I got asked to go to Seattle to talk to the Scottish Rite Freemasons, who are the real Freemasons, by the way. They are the Templars under a different name. And I said during a long champagne breakfast, which I don't remember much afterwards, they take work very seriously up there. And I said, I don't know, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this or publish this, but I got a feeling that the 33rd degree is a convenient rounding off number of what happens when you work with gravity to influence your state of consciousness, which technically is the highest level of initiation. When you learn all the mysteries teachings, the highest level of initiation is to leave the body in a conducted state, go traveling in the astral world and come back, and you have the laws of nature at your disposal. Except that the angle, the actual number is 32.72. 32.72. 33 is the convenient number, because you can't go to a party and say, I'm a 32.72 degree Freemason. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. And they looked at each other and they went, absolutely right, just don't publish it too much. I said, whoops. Can I talk about it? You can talk about it. But yeah, it's true. It's about understanding how to manipulate the laws of gravity to allow the soul to leave and enter the body whenever you want. Not just by going into a temple. You can stand here, work with your internal geometry, manipulate gravity inside you in a way which I don't know yet. And then your soul escapes, comes back with information, and you remember everything. That's what the main teachers throughout our history have always done, whether his name was Jesus, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Plato, Pythagoras. They all did the same thing. That's how they were geniuses. They plucked the information from the other world using this technique. And that's what led to mastery of the self and instant enlightenment. That's the biggest mystery teaching of the entire planet. It's why people... Oh, God. Is it really 5% humidity up here? It's what people, in all these groups search for in their lifelong search for inner illumination. It's the ultimate teaching. So the sacred sites are engaging in a communication at a very molecular level. And the filling of the veil at sacred spaces allows for all manner of experiences. When I was learning my craft, and you tripping over myself, of course, because you don't know everything, I approached this site in Ireland, beautiful stone circle, in a beautiful setting, and I was setting up my camera, getting ready to communicate, and I watched this incredible image of this incredible woman, about 8 feet tall, dressed in this beautiful satin, pop up next to that large stone. I thought, wow, that is so cool. Of course, it doesn't come out on camera. And I conferred with my psychic friend in England, who's an incredible teacher, and I said, is there something about this stone circle where there's a protective deity there, a very tall woman dressed in a white setting thing, about 8? Oh, yeah, well, you were Urag. I said, how do you know? That's where she lives. Wow, so I'm getting it right. You're getting there. And then, you develop these things. One of my greatest experiences was in the Great Pyramid, my first trip there. I went there with a group to clean up the building, because you won't believe the psychic bullshit that goes into that building every day, and the building is sitting there tired. It's a very sensitive environment, and people go in there, they're running up and down the building, they're swearing, they're sweating, they're going there to take pictures of themselves, and the building is like, that's not what I was built for. So we go in there at the sacred sites, we clean up the mess energetically that people leave and reset the building. And then when you go in, and it feels good. People are doing this all around the world, by the way. There are groups everywhere. You won't know who they are. And we were rewarded, 4 of us who stayed behind, we were rewarded by going into the King's Chamber. Everybody left the building. And the lights went out. We're in complete darkness. And we're going, bloody hell. This shouldn't be happening. Oh. Sorry, that's too much energy. And I just remember doing a chant in there, and I saw, as clearly as I'm watching you right now in pitch darkness, about 30 people coming out of the stones are surrounding us, about this tall, dressed in white, and we're toning, and I'm going, I hope someone can see what I'm seeing. And they kind of bowed like this, and I bowed back, and I got so many questions to ask, and they go back into the stone. I went, and the lights come back on, and then 3 other guys in there were looking at each other in shock. I said, did anybody saw what I just saw? I said, yeah, there was the guys who came out, out of the stone, and they're about this tall, and they're dressed. Okay, we agree. All of us saw this in pitch dark. 30 guardians come out, and what just happened? So we walked out of the building, and there was our fearless, glorious teacher, the psychic, with the rest of the group. And they said, well, we were tuned in to you guys, because they couldn't get in for some reason. We tuned into what you were doing in there, and we didn't say a thing. And they said, well, you did exactly what you're supposed to do. You cleaned up the building, you honored the building, and did you enjoy being honored by the guardians? And I said, that actually happened. I said, of course it happened. Why do you think we're doing this? And that's when I quit my day job, and that was a large paycheck, by the way. I took a big leap of faith, because I thought, now I understand why these things exist and what they do. And the experience, by the way, was experienced in 1926 by an Englishman called Paul Brunton, who was a skeptical journalist, who said, and I quote, I don't see the direction of the world taking a very positive angle. And that was in 1926. So, yeah, if you look at the news today and you think, I can't see things good coming out of what's going on politically around the world, it's been going on forever. And he went on to the Great Pyramid, and I had this book in my bookshop. I never read it. And when I was publishing my experience, I thought it would be great if there's someone else has experienced this to back up what I'm saying. And I thought, oh, hang on, In Secret Egypt by Paul Brunton. Maybe wait a minute, yeah, he spent the whole night in there. He described the same people coming out of the stones, dressed in the same manner, and they took him into all the hidden chambers that we're only just now discovering through special equipment. And he said, what's in that room? And these 2 rooms are in there. And the guide said, we didn't manage to take everything out of the building, and that's been sealed, and humans are not yet at the level where they'll understand what's in there. They'll just destroy each other. And then, boom, he wakes up, he's back in the box. So now I know that Paul validated what I experienced, and I validated what he wrote about. And many people, it's also happened to them. But it's not the only aspect of temple technology that's going on. There's also the design of the chambers themselves. And despite the fact that this chamber at Newgrange is designed like 3 wombs, and this dolmen at the tip of Cornwall is just a tiny little chamber, or the Great Pyramid is a big rectangular cubic box, or the fact that this underground chamber in Malta has 33 chambers carved out of the bedrock. They all look different, but they all share one thing in common. They have a resonant frequency of 112 hertz. And it took a neurologist to actually look at this information and say, you know what, that's a very important frequency because it acts as a switch. It shuts down your left brain and switches your current to the right brain so you can feel the temple. You can't interpret it logically. So each temple is designed to shut down your thinking process and get you to feel the sacred space. That is really, really cool. And then, of course, there's the irony that we only now, with the technology that we have, can we actually sense and see this energy. This is the energy field going in and out of Menantol. It's a local healing site in Cornwall where women take their sick children and pass them through the hole in the stone to cure them of all kinds of diseases. They still do it today. Why? They don't know, but that's what's happening. They're following the energy pattern, and it's accentuated by the design of the materials in the actual rock. And all of this was actually described in a study at Princeton in the 1980s. They did an experiment, and they designed the computer to actually find out what happens when you measure the energy of any given place and what happens when you add your intention to it. So this is a very famous experiment. They started in a laboratory. They started with a computer, and the computer was giving you a drum beat. So it was boom, boom, boom. 20 people were asked to concentrate their intention on the machine to try and change the drum beat, and guess what? They succeeded. If you can do that to a machine, imagine the power that you have right now at your disposal. So the next part was to take it out into the landscape. They wanted to find out, how can you measure the energy of sacred sites, which of course perks up my ears, because I just want to tell you from experience. I want to show you by science. And they went over to a place called Matteo Tapilla, Devil's Tower in English. And it's a very sacred site, and they actually measured the medicine man ceremony, and it had a definitive effect on the output of a machine. They took the same medicine man to a Walmart car park, and the machine did absolutely nothing. Okay, so the effect of a medicine man ceremony at a sacred site can be measured, and it has a definitive effect. Well, then they went to Egypt. They went around to the pyramids. They went to Luxor and Karnak. And the lead scientist walked around with a portable version of the computer, picking up just the energy of the temple was higher, 6 times stronger than even a group under meditation. So just the temple by itself was generating more energy than a whole classroom of people sitting here doing Om. So it's like, wow, what happens when you put people in a temple in Egypt doing meditation? Well, the combination of the focus group intent plus the temple created an expanded consciousness that yielded the highest results ever seen. So in other words, the temples are generating conditions that induce an elevated awareness, but when people add the intention, the energy field is enhanced. Clearly, we are an integral part of this technology, which is why I always refer to these things as self-help centers. When you don't believe that you can do this by yourself with your inner temple, go to the temple because it's designed to convince you to expand your consciousness. That's how it works. And the temples by themselves also are designed to bend the local energy field of the earth. There's a grid that floats about 3 feet above the earth called the Harman grid. And in Egypt and in India, the temples actually move that field around to create a negative environment where the weather is perfect. So the walls are acting as a perimeter to shield out anything else to create the conditions for you to have this incredible experience. If you get down to Saqqara in Egypt, you'll have exactly the same thing. There's a unique passageway, which is a bunch of reeds, 42 reeds in groups of 17, which I won't go into because it tells you so much of what the place is for. But there's an instruction there that says 7 degrees of perfection enabled a passage from Earth into the other world. And I had no idea what they were talking about until I went there with some dowsing rods, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm getting pushed and pulled and pushed and pulled between the pillars and the walls between. What's going on here? And I've got a diagram which shows that there's a push-pull effect as you're walking down this preparatory hallway, getting you to stop thinking about your problems and get you to be in a place of mindfulness. And there are exactly 7 positive nodes or gates that you have to cross to establish yourself into a state of perfection. And then you are now able to enter the temple of the gods. You are in a perfect state. And the texts in that temple say, the point is to master yourself before crossing the threshold of each gate. So they're getting you to be mindful so that you don't pollute the actual environment. Same thing's happening in Ireland, in Newgrange. You get down the passage of Newgrange, the rocks are arranged with the positive poles pointing to the center, so that when you walk towards the altar, you are being pushed and pulled from left to right, and you achieve absolute balance. So all of these are preparing you to arrive at that place called the altar, where you are actually altered. So to wrap it all up, there was a time when sacred sites were referred to as cities of knowledge, repositories of ancient wisdom once given to us by the gods, aliens, whatever you want to call them. And in turn, all of these places provided us with a sense of identity, of purpose, sustenance, continuity, and also spiritual fulfillment. And as long as it was properly maintained, the temple functioned as an intermediary between people and the living universe. And that relationship provided an antidote from humanity reverting into a state of barbarity, which it does so easily and effortless. So if you're looking for guidance in these times of turbulence, which we are in the middle of, then I suggest you go interact with this incredible insurance policy that was built for you, because clearly these places were designed to outlast anything that hit them into our lifetime, so we could actually go and find out the hotspots on the earth where the energy allows you to connect with something greater to yourself. And when you do, something magical happens. You become a master of the Jed pillar, which is the pillar representing the supreme life force of the universe, the very backbone of life, which ostensibly transforms you into a Jedi master. You think he was kidding when you wrote that? No. You become a master of the force. And if you can achieve that, the only master you'll ever have to answer to will be yourself and nobody else. I think that's a pretty good reason to travel around the world to a sacred site. So go transform yourselves. And if you need any more information, yes, I've got documents and books that you can go and look at. Thanks very much again, and hopefully I'll see you next year.